Hello, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. How you doing tonight?
So far, so good. Where's Matt?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We say he knows where we are. He can come whenever he rolls in. How's everyone doing tonight? Let's check in. Hope everyone's doing great. Let's see. Oh, looks all the usuals. Let's see. We are broadcasting through Axanar and Aries Studios channels and various other Facebook pages. Laura Happel, really looking forward to the fan film. Well, thank you, Laura. So are we. We actually have a little surprise coming up soon too. Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Hello from Australia, says Facebook user. That's pretty generic. So you have to authorize them to get your information. You have to authorize StreamYard when you sign on through Facebook. So make sure you do that, Facebook user. Anyway, hello to everyone out there. So my day was busy since Jim asked. I don't know how you guys were doing. I mean, I was like up at 7. Now, granted, I started my day off with like a good hour and a half of World of Warships. But, and then I rushed over to get my hair cut, and then I just bought gaming. Like Crystal and I she needs a chair in her office. She's got this shitty IKEA plastic $19 chair that just sucks. And I'm using like a dining room chair in the basement in the fulfillment area. So today I bought gaming chairs for both of us.
Nice.
Yeah. So of course I told her it was her Christmas gift. So I said, hey, set me back a little bit, but here we go. But it's all good. So yeah, and it was funny because I was like checking out like, oh man, when you're trying to figure something out, and you look for the top 10 list online.
Uh-huh.
And most of the time it's bullshit. Most of the time it's like, I'm looking like who are the top 10 gaming chairs for this year. And of course, most of the time it's like the top 10, the ones that are listed in the top 10 are the ones who put up the website that says these are the top 10 chairs. And of course, theirs is number one, of course.
Yeah.
So I found Popular Mechanics had one, so that was good. So let's see if I can, I'll show you the chairs I got. So, here's let's see. All right. Here's the chair I got her, which of course is very apropos to her.
Nice.
It's a nice pink one.
So are they good and comfortable?
Yeah. All the it's funny because all these gaming chairs kind of look the same.
Mm-hmm.
They look similar. They all look they're all kind of padded. They all kind of look like, fancy Recaro aftermarket car seats.
Mm-hmm.
And but they're pretty good. I mean, the seat I'm sitting in now is like some $2,000 fancy ass orthopedic chair from Relax the Back store when I first got back, back in the, I get this is at least 15 years old. So anyway, so I got her that one. And then for myself, I was like, oh, what, she wanted one based on color. She didn't care if it was the best or, this
right.
For myself, I got this one.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, knowing what a huge Captain America fan I am. I saw this. I said, that's the one I'm getting. The cool. Captain America, the Winter Soldier style Captain America chair. So,
well, let me know how you like it, because I've got a chair that I'm mostly happy with, but only mostly. So at some point I might want to upgrade.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I actually went to Micro Center this morning after my haircut because I thought, I mean, before the COVID hit, I know they had like a dozen chairs out on display. You could just sit in them and see how you liked them. Mm-hmm. Not anymore. They're all up on a shelf somewhere. So that didn't do me any good. So, yeah, but they're all pretty good. I'll give it. And if you check Facebook Marketplace, my dog's going crazy.
Upgrading their chairs.
Yeah, Facebook Marketplace has dealers. Now I don't know near you, but near us there's dealers who just sell them, and they're all 125 to $150. They're all pretty cheap. You just pick them up yourself. So
I had to go buy a chair early on in the COVID crisis because the one I had decided to periodically disconnect the seat from the cylinder. And since at the time I had a stand-up desk, so this is a draftsman's chair, so it would be an extra high fall if that happened. And so I ended up I went to Walmart, bought their absolute last office chair in stock. It was some crappy $30 thing, but I went ahead and bought it just in case, because I didn't know if I was going to be able to find one. And then I went to Target and bought their last office chair, which was a better chair, more expensive chair. But still not quite what I wanted. And then I eventually replaced both of those with what you got from Amazon. So since March, I've bought 3 office chairs, of which I'm only using one. One of them I never took out of the box. For all I know, it's a bunch of pans.
Jim Westbrook wants to know if I'm wearing pants. Actually, to the thrill of the girls on Two Geek Girls, I'm wearing shorts tonight. Last night we had to cancel at the last minute. We had to cancel Axanar Confidential because Ted Brunetti, our new director, had a family emergency. I was like, okay, fine. So I don't like just canceling. So I typically go on and do a 10-minute live stream and just say, we're canceling tonight. Here's what's up, whatever. And anyway, so Lissa came on with me, and we wound up, it wound up being like 40 minutes of us saying we're not live streaming tonight. but at one point, Itty Bitty, my crazy little dog who you see down there, so I had just ridden the Peloton, and I jumped in the shower, and I put on a shirt, and I was like, I'm just going on for 10 minutes to tell them I'm not streaming. I'm not going to put on any pants. So I started streaming without pants, just in my shorts, and not even my shorts, my trunks, my briefs. And at one point, Itty's like back there, and she starts eating a push pin. And I jump up, and I think I gave everyone a nice big shot of my trunk-clad ass. So I'm a little more careful now, always wearing shorts. What's up, sweetie? So there we go. Okay, so what is the top that we're not talking about my ass tonight? What is the topic of tonight? Oh, by the way, I asked Chris, and everyone can. Chris, did you do some research on my question for you?
I did. In fact, so I did what I always do in this situation. I asked Pat and I asked Andy Presby, who's actually I see is in the chat. He said he was going to try to join us for at least a little time. He usually only watches stuff after the fact because he's got 2 children under 3, if I remember correctly, and so he doesn't get a chance to do fun adult stuff much anymore. And so we were going back and looking through a bunch of different things there. The question was, what are starships actually made out of? And in the Axanar time period. So we can sort of kind of guess what they might be made out of. We hear about tritanium, we hear about duranium. If you go back to the Next Gen Tech Manual, it specifically talks about the alloys used in the space frame versus what's used in the hull, etc. But there's a considerable time difference between that and the time period of the original series. And I'm not sure if we've got an actual canon description of what that hull is made out of. I suspect if it's there, it's in probably one of the novelizations of the movies. But I'm going to try to pull all that stuff together and send it to you.
Okay, cool.
Andy's saying that the hull is duranium mostly, and the primary space frame is tritanium. And neither of those things are things you can find on the periodic table.
Yet.
Yeah. And so Andy says they're all made up metals. And he says NX-01's hull is lined with duranium. I don't think I would call it made up metals. I think I would call it made up alloys, because they're probably alloys of something else. And the material science that we see in Star Trek is such that they could be making up alloys that we can't do today. There was a really interesting article from about, maybe 7 years ago now, and that I periodically go back and see if we've seen anything new on it, where a Korean company was able to make an alloy of aluminum and steel. That's actually really hard to do because of the way the crystallization works. You end up with lots of it fractures very easily. Mm-hmm. But they were able, using a special heating and cooling process and doing that, and I guess patting their head and rubbing their stomach at the same time or something like that, they were able to get it to crystallize in the way they needed it to. And so you ended up with something that was basically almost as lightweight as titanium, with all of the property, with the cost of steel. And so better performance than aluminum, much lighter than steel. And they were talking about how, this would revolutionize auto production. Don't know what's going on.
Well, this all came out of I'm writing a piece. I'm writing the speech that Garth gives when the Ares is retired and put in the Starfleet Museum.
Ah, okay.
So I won't give away what he says, but I need to talk about the ship and what it's made out of. So that's why I asked. And Stephen Ross, we have a super chat from Stephen Ross. Thank you. He says, I remember at a convention in Pittsburgh, leaned back in an office type chair in a hotel room, a bolt sheared off. Ouch. That could have been very problematic.
Yeah. Rob Davidoff has an interesting comment, as does Jim Westbrook. Davidoff's comment is, if you can create the structure that you're looking for in a replication phase, and by that I think he means, if you're using a replicator, something based on transporter technology, and maybe you can, which strikes me as the material science equivalent of fixing it in software.
Yeah, right.
Wouldn't it? That would be tremendous if you can just sort of take the pieces and then fix it when you do that, when you replicate it. Boy, that's got a lot of interesting implications. And the other comment was Jim Westbrook asked about transparent aluminum. Transparent aluminum is actually a really fascinating topic. The reason why they picked that for the original show was that there were already material scientists who thought we should be able to come up with a transparent version of this. It had all the hallmarks of something that could be transparent. And so they didn't just, they later developed transparent aluminum. It's not just that the movie happened to pick something and they got it right just by random accident. It's like, no, they picked it for sound physics reasons. And then later they were able to actually replicate the thing that they knew that was theoretically possible.
So that's why you have a science advisor.
Yeah, that's why you have a science advisor. And so they came up with, they can now make transparent aluminum. It's not quite optical quality, but it's I don't think, the pieces that I've seen I haven't seen it in person. I've only seen it online. But the last I heard, the biggest impediment in using it is that you have to have a special type of furnace to do it. And there was a limit. The biggest one they had was like this, right? So you couldn't make anything bigger than about that size, and they were going to have to scale it up to do things. But they were talking about transparent aluminum, bulletproof glass replacements that would be, nowadays bulletproof glass is like that, right? It's really thick, maybe like that. And so the idea of having something that's way thinner, that's really like a glass replacement, as opposed to you could use it like you would use normal glasses instead of having this other thing, instead of having to totally redesign the car to make it work. So that would be cool.
All right.
Cool.
So before we get on our main topic, we got to do a little pup day today. Today I actually was the last day that Everest was going to be at Off Leash Farms. Everest, of course, is the adorable little dog that I've been keeping track of, and I tell you, if we hadn't just adopted Itty Bitty, the little terror that's running around here, we would have be adopting this little dog. But this little dog, fortunately, has a good home. I'm going to share a photo. Oh, no, that's not it. Wrong share. Let me hold on. Oh, what is this application window there? So there's me and Everest today at Off Leash Farms, which is a foster care facility. A cute little dog, but I just thought I'd share because a lot of you have been following Everest. She is doing fantastic. She is 8 pounds, and tomorrow morning at dark 30, she heads up to her new family up in I believe it's in Connecticut. So there we go.
Cool.
So this okay, and now the other thing is this is something that I know many of you listen. Sometimes some of you donate to the animal rescues, and we always appreciate it. Here is here is the latest. Now we work with two animal rescues here in Georgia, and one of them is Tracy, and she has a fundraiser, and this is the fundraiser. I'm putting the information in the chat window. If you click on it, you'll go here to Freedom Bridge Animal Rescue's Pampered Chef Fundraiser. And what it is you can click on this Shop Now button, all right? And they have all sorts of products that you can buy. And by buying one of these products, you donate to the animal rescue. Those are tea bags, not condoms. So anyway, I know. So we're looking at, we're donating in this thing. And this is, that was what we wanted. Where did that go? We're going to buy one of these dish pans because Crystal's mother uses them all the time. Where was that? Anyway, here it is, gifts. So. I mean, they've got also some of the stuff's really expensive. We're just going for the $25 item, and if you guys can donate, if you want to buy something cool, maybe as a gift for your mom or your grandma or your wife or whoever, they have dozens and dozens of items, and by buying something from this, the money goes to Freedom Bridge Animal Rescue, who we have done a lot of work for. This is Shane Freund, who adopted Mojo. That was through Freedom Bridge. And Freedom Bridge is the one that got us to the other rescue that we work with, TLC, who took care of the 13 Malinois puppies. So I've put the link there in the comments section. I'm going to put it in again. Please, I'm going to do this while Chris and Pat are talking. I'm going to buy something here. And support the Freedom Bridge Animal Rescue. So if you can do it, that would be great. So thank you so much. All right, now back to business. And what is business for tonight, Chris? Tell them what they've won, Chris.
So Pat and I followed our usual routine, which is a conversation on Saturday afternoon. Where it's like, okay, we talked last week about what we're going to talk about this week, so we should talk about a little bit before we go on the show. But it turns out we didn't actually talk about what we were going to talk about this week. So we were sort of thinking about it, et cetera, and we got talking about how Starfleet approaches combat operations and the different levels of war and what that might look like in specifically a Starfleet setting. Because that's one of those things that there's some things that Star Trek does really, really well, but there's other things where, Pat and I are both Naval War College graduates, and we sort of look at it sometimes with our head a little bit askew because we see the pieces that are missing.
Hey,
there's things there that we would expect them to have to be doing to do the sorts of things that they're doing, but we don't know if it doesn't happen or where it's happening. And so we thought that maybe it would be a good thing to sort of talk a little bit about the different levels of war and how those all fit in, and then have that lead into a discussion about how it might make sense for Starfleet to do something like that. For those instances when Starfleet does fight wars. And one thing I thought of after I got off the phone with Pat is I was once again reminded that there are big pieces of Deep Space Nine that I haven't seen. Just because at that point in my life, there was some other stuff going on and I just didn't, I've just never gone back and sort of caught up on it. And so I realized after I got off the phone with Pat that I picked a topic that it's perhaps all the stuff I'm going to say actually is in there, and I just haven't seen it. I don't think so, though. I don't see Pat's smiling a little bit, but he's not totally laughing at me.
No, I was actually just jotting down a couple little notes of items to bring up and stuff like that. So,
okay. Pat's the one because Pat's been doing a game set in that universe. Pat has been going back through all the different Star Trek series and watching them specifically with wearing his Navy lieutenant or his Navy commander hat, not his lieutenant commander hat, his commander hat, and sort of thinking about those things in his game designer hat. So he's much more, he's seen everything much more recently than I have.
Is Andy Presby one of your guys?
Yes.
Oh, well, we can always send him an invite if you want.
Yes, and he would actually be a great person to have on the show at some point. So we should do that at some point. Yeah, Andy's a retired Navy commander. His wife was also in the Navy. She's a Naval Academy graduate, and now she writes science fiction for a living.
Oh, wow.
So,
Andy, I've just sent you a friend request. So you can, and here I will. I just sent him an invite too, so he can join us.
Oh, that would be good. That would be good. So it occurred to me that a good place to start might, with a level of war discussion, might be with a slide on the levels of war. So,
and Pat just happens to have one. That's what you're going to tell me, right?
No, but I have one that Pat and I.
It could be him that has it.
I have one that Pat and I put together. So let me. I'm going to try the share screen.
You dug up an old PowerPoint?
So is it sharing?
So far, no.
There we go.
So just for give everybody a brief introduction into this stuff before we go too deep. When we talk about levels of war, what we're talking about, everyone's heard the word tactics, everyone's heard the word strategy, and they mean different things. So there's sort of, well, and you can go into the detail like that's on this chart. You can have 5 levels, but at the real basic level, you've got strategic and you've got operational level and you got tactics. So strategic is think about the plan that the country has to win the war. I'm going to oversimplify just to give everybody an initial basis to understand the discussion. So strategic is going to be the plan that the United States has overall, resource allocation, construction plans, what country they're sending aid to, all that kind of stuff. That's going to be your strategic plan.
We lost that slide, Chris, by the way.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it bigger.
Okay.
But I had to do some swapping of screens to do that.
And then at the lowest level, you have tactics. You've heard the word tactics before and stuff. And basically what that is that's how do you win a battle, right? It's done with inside of the enemy. It's how you're going to maneuver your people and what you're going to shoot at and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of the lowest level. That's how you win a battle, basically. Strategic is how you win a war. But in the middle between those two, there's the operational level of war. And again, to oversimplify it, it means deciding what battles you need to fight so that you do win the war. Because just going around randomly blindly attacking people just means you're going to waste a lot of resource and be very inefficient in the conduct of the war. There's a good quote by Sun Tzu. And it says, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So generally, you can win with bad tactics and good strategy. It's really hard to win with bad strategy, even if you have good tactics. So, but then, like I said, they call it operational art sometimes. And that is figuring out what battles you need to go fight so that you can obtain your strategic objectives. So that's about it. So,
yeah, I would add a few things into there.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, I mean that was a really good overview. But I would add into it a couple of things if you look at this slide that I've put up, you can see that there's the three main levels that you see there. And then there's these levels in between. And one of the dirty little secrets about the people who talk about operations and strategy, everyone has a pretty good understanding of what tactics is. But when it comes to all the operations and strategy and the words that go along with them, like center of gravity, et cetera, there is a, shall we say, healthy discussion that takes place over what those terms mean and how to think about them. It can be very, very frustrating for Naval War College students. It was very frustrating for several of the people in my class in that it's like, just give me the damn definition and let me run with it. And, there's official Department of Defense definitions on this stuff. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of disagreement between the various people, between the various theorists about all this stuff. But this is sort of a general agreement. Most people agree on something that looks like this. You've got a strategic, operational, and tactical levels. You've got the levels in between there, like between strategic and operational. You've got this theater strategic level, which is where the sort of the circles overlap between them. And then grand tactical, you can kind of think of in a lot of ways as like the maneuvering that happens before you actually get into the battle. It's the tactical maneuvering in support of the battle. Also, at the very top, you can talk about a grand strategy level that's actually one step up from the strategic level. So like the grand strategy level would be the level where Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt are making their decisions. And then the strategic level is where Marshall and King and those folks are making their decisions. But again, there's some disagreement there. So one of the big things that occurs in sort of the post-war era is this understanding that the operational level of war is more than just logistical support for campaigns. A lot of folks would have said, if you said, what's in between strategy and tactics, they'd say, well, it's all logistics at that middle level. But in practice, that's actually not really correct. There's some other things that go on there. It's a way of thinking about that middle level, and you have to think about things beyond just the logistics side of it. And that includes things like there's one phrase that they use called operational fires. So when the U.S. military in particular talks about fires, that's anytime you make something go boom. And they've extended that to include things that only go boom in a metaphoric sense. Like they'll use words like that to describe things like cyber, where, it's not really that it goes boom, it's that it goes down, it doesn't work anymore. And so they'll talk about fires as a term sort of basically meaning effects. The effect of a bomb is to create a hole. The effect of a missile might be to make a plane fall out of the sky. The effect of a cyber thing might be to make the enemy's computer network crash. Operational fires are the fires that are done that are in support of an operation but are not directly related to it. And there's an example that comes from World War II when we were engaged in the Philippines trying to seize Leyte Island, which we wanted to put bombers on. We never actually ended up doing that because it turned out the ground wasn't capable of supporting heavy concrete runways very well. But as part of that campaign to retake the Philippines, we're conducting carrier raids on Taiwan, where the Japanese had a major presence there. And we're conducting carrier raids in other parts of the Pacific. It wasn't direct support of what was going on in the Philippines, but it was indirect support in that it was keeping the Japanese tied down so they couldn't come and muck with the operation we had going on in the Philippines. And so these are the sorts of things that you sort of end up thinking about at the operational level of war. At the strategic level of war, you're not really thinking in those terms. You're really thinking more in terms of what the center of gravity is and how can I use my elements of national power to defeat his elements of national power. At the tactical level, you're thinking more about like, how do I maneuver my forces around in this particular battlefield? At the operational level, you're thinking about the logistics stuff and how do I sequence a bunch of battles into an operation, and how do I sequence the operations into a campaign that in the end allows me to achieve the strategic goals that I've been given for that series of operations. So that's kind of how we think about that today. I don't ever recall any Star Trek character ever saying words like that.
Well, so Rob
now
David
will tell me I'm wrong.
Well, there wasn't a spot. So I'll point out two examples. Rob Davidoff pointed out correctly that in Axanar, at one point in there, they talked about we had three plans. What was it? One wasn't worth spit. One was crazy as hell. And the other one looked like it had a chance. And at this level, that's a lot of what you're doing is you'll probably come up with multiple plans. We call them courses of action or COAs. And while it's a little more I'm going to oversimplify again, but you're going to weigh the pros and cons of each of those plans, the costs and benefits of each of those plans. And from there, your admiral or whoever's in charge is going to make a decision on which one you want to use and which plan is going to make the most sense for the larger strategic or operational goals. And you can come up with those plans at the tactical level, at the operational level, and on up. The other one is in Deep Space Nine, I think, and we don't necessarily see a whole lot of weighing multiple options. Sisko has decided on the option he wants, which is retake Deep Space Nine, and he's trying to sell it to the Admiralty because he came up with a plan and has worked it out and all that kind of stuff. So we see a little bit of that in the strategic, so in that case, they're planning an operation. They called it Operation Return. It involves 500 or 600 ships plus the Klingons. So a joint combined operation between the Federation and the Klingons to retake Deep Space Nine. So we saw it in there. A couple other items we see in Deep Space Nine. there was another spot during the war where Beta Z got taken over because the one of the fleets was, I think, the 9th Fleet or something like that, was out doing training exercise, and the Dominion slipped in the back door and took over Beta Z before they were able to do anything. So we see an example there of the Federation practicing, and a large operation and everything. Unfortunately, they picked the bad day to do it, and got messed up. But we also see some tactical level exercises in Star Trek. The two that come to mind immediately is in the original series, The Ultimate Computer, where there's an exercise. It's going to be a war game. They're going to have four cruisers against the Enterprise trying to hunt it down. So that would be an example of a tactical level training exercise that they're doing. And then in Next Generation, I can't remember the name of the battle, but I think they get the Hathaway from the Zach Dorn strategic genius guy, and they're going to run an exercise, and they have a discussion about how Starfleet's not primarily a military organization, and that they think it's a waste of time and all that kind of stuff. But Picard says, well, I think it would help our people out to get a little bit of practice and work on this kind of stuff. So and it's probably a good idea to do that, since not everybody's all that friendly out there, no matter how friendly you claim your mission is. So anyways, we do see some examples throughout Star Trek of them doing some military type exercises. Part of this leads into the question of whether or not Starfleet's a military organization or not. But we have now seen Deep Space Nine. They fought a war. If you want to, we've got Axanar, where we're seeing parts of a war, and we did see some of the strategic map in Axanar of how the Klingons were moving through. The map shifted red from blue to red, and we saw that. And then was it Discovery? We saw the Federation Klingon War in there, and we saw the very beginnings of a war in Errand of Mercy. Just got cut short. So anyhow, Chris, I'm just kind of wondering, like,
oops, sorry, the Romulan War, which they talk about.
Oh, in the Romulan War much earlier, yeah. And unfortunately, we didn't get to see a whole lot of that. That seems like but actually, we could talk about the Romulans had a strategy to try to keep, they see all these races in Empire, or all these races, the Vulcans, the Andorians, the humans, all out there. And they decide it's in their strategic best interest to make sure all those people are fighting against each other. So that way they don't come after the Romulan Empire and pose a threat to the Romulan Empire. So then we saw them do all those holographic ships or whatever to impersonate other ships, so they could start a conflict between all of those. So that was their strategy, was to keep all those empires or all those planets off balance and fighting each other. And that was their strategy. Tactics they used were, send these holographic ships to impersonate other races and start a war between them. And so we saw that. But ultimately, we saw that strategy backfired. It ended up uniting all those races into the Federation, into a larger threat. So we do see pieces of some of the big movements between the different empires there.
So there was something else I wanted to bring up real quick. So let me share the screen again. Right. Is it coming up?
Let's see. Yes, it is.
So, Pat, I don't know if you've seen this book before.
Vaguely familiar.
Yeah, vaguely familiar. Oh, look, that name sounds familiar. But we know that it's not our Patrick Doyle, because he's not a fleet captain. He's only a commander. So
I am a captain in my civilian job.
That's true. That's true. As an airline pilot, you are a captain. So I bring this up because this is the sort of thing, it's sort of funny reading this, because as I read this, even if I didn't know Pat, when I go through the section down here on fleet captains and battle planning and 3 levels of war in the Starfleet universe, et cetera, it's just I end up having a flashback to my Naval War College master's program. It's pretty obvious that the person who wrote those sections had at least some exposure to the Naval War College, the sorts of things that they teach at the War College. And so I thought it was worth actually bringing up. Now, the Starfleet universe has some very important differences from Star Trek writ large. And it's also, this is a tactics manual about a particular game. But all the different stuff here in this last section, especially, it's all about, Pat talks about coming up with COAs and wargaming the COAs against the possible enemy COAs. And in this case, it's not really like play 9 games in order to get ready to play the real game that you're going to play against your buddy, but it is more about like do thought experiments to sort of go through it in your head. And when you're reading through the victory conditions, that will give you a clue as to how you should be approaching the battle. And it's a really nifty. Pat's done a very good job of distilling a bunch of real world processes down to something that works for a game. So
thank you.
There aren't very many instances out there of people having thought about tactics specifically in a science fiction type of way. The Venn diagram of people that write about science fiction space combat and the people who have real world war college or real world tactical experiences, there is some overlap between those, but there's not as much as you might hope. John Hemry, in his Lost Fleet series, he writes as Jack Campbell. John's a Naval Academy graduate who, class of 77, if I remember correctly, who was a surface warfare officer. He also did some intel work in his career, etc. He does some great stuff in there. And he's another guy that when you read him, you can sort of, I can see the signs that he's got that kind of education. And so it's worth pointing these people out because they're people that are worth going and reading. So.
I'm just looking up Federation Commander on eBay and seeing all the different stuff they've got there. So
yeah. It is a very fun game, and that's a game that's a little game universe. So it kind of diverges from Star Trek, probably right around somewhere in the middle of the 5-year mission. And think of it as almost an alternate timeline. They only ever had the rights to portions of the old series. So there's nothing from the movies or Next Generation that is allowed to make it in there because he bought the rights to the game to Star Trek before it was incredibly valuable, and so he has to guard it very jealously. So.
Right. Yes, I know, because we had talked to him at one point about somehow working with us, and he wanted nothing to do with it.
Oh yeah.
It's just too dangerous to their. I'm fascinated to understand how their license works, because they get away with a lot.
Yeah.
As I understand it, a key portion of it was that they're not so much a spin-off of Star Trek as that they're a spin-off of Franz Joseph.
Yes. That's what I heard.
And you can end up with some weird stuff when you're spinning off of something that's a spin-off. And Franz Joseph got permission, I think, after the fact, if I understand the story correctly, from Roddenberry, etc. Back when nobody, Star Trek was just this TV show that had failed,
right? And
nobody really cared. And as I understand it, Franz Joseph, the impetus behind it was his daughter was a rabid Star Trek fan and a member of a Star Trek fan club. and he was he worked for General Dynamics and doing aircraft design and stuff like that. He was an old school draftsman, and so he put together some blueprints and stuff just to make his daughter happy.
Oh my gosh, really?
And then you know, he did them for the club, and at some point this turned into a, hey, Mr. Roddenberry, can we do something with this? Oh, I thought I had stopped sharing, but I hadn't, had I?
Hey, I want to answer one quick question real quick. Jim Westbrook. It is a board game. It's not actually a computer game, though, and it's called Federation Commander. But they also did come up with a computerized version of the game called Starfleet Command. And the latest version of that was Starfleet Command Orion Pirates. But the first version of the game, called Starfleet Command, you can get on Steam. And a lot of the tactics we talk about in there, if you can apply them in real time in the computer game, will generally work. Because they take the great thing about that computer game is it's a spaceship computer game where they actually took a board game that had 20 years of playtesting, and they've got a good solid foundation, so the game works, as opposed to just being a lot of special effects and sound effects and explosions. So it's really good. I'd highly recommend it for anyone who likes that stuff.
And I know some serious game designers who actually have very good things to say about what Steve Cole has done with Starfleet Battles, because one of the things about that universe is that it's internally consistent. I mean, the tactics come from the game. It's been around enough that, you know, one of the problems you run into with a lot of science fiction games, especially, is that the designer had this idea about how it should work, and they create a game with a particular set of units and a particular set of concepts about how it's going to work, and they put all that in there. And, you know, when a game gets released, it's going to be play tested more, or it's going to be played more in its first couple of months than it was in the entire development process, regardless of how long that is. Just because you've dumped it out into the world, and if the more popular it is, the more true that is. So, you know, I could work on something for 15 years, but it's going to go out into the real world, and it's going to get, you know, 10 times as much plays fairly quickly than it did during the playtesting portion, if it has any level of success. And so you see this with like BattleTech and some of these other games, where they come out and they clearly had a vision of what was good and what worked and how the world works. And then you play the game, and yeah, they're wrong. They're wrong about their own game. If you ever played the first edition of BattleTech was called Battle Droids. That one went away really fast after George Lucas found out about it. And then there was the first and second edition BattleTech. The first edition especially, I called the other one the Zero edition. You had these mech designs, the Phoenix Hawk and the Shadow Hawk, et cetera, things like that were supposedly just like, these are the ones that everybody uses. And if you played the game at all, it's like, why on earth would you use that? That's not very good. Why? It's like saying everybody drives a Ford Pinto because the Ford Pinto is the best car out there. It's like, no, it's not. Why did you create a universe where everybody drives the Ford Pinto? I've seen that with a lot of other games too, where they, like Traveller went through this phase where they had battleships, and they had spacecraft carriers, and they had fighters. And it quickly got to the point of like, yeah, why do these things exist? Why would any Navy ever build that? And that really, you know, it became kind of a problem. And for a while there, Traveller kept trying to come up with different reasons as to why people would build the things that they said that they were building. It just didn't make sense to do it that way.
So there was another question here. So Federation Commander is sort of a modernization or a simplification of a game called Starfleet Battle. So they're very similar games, but they updated the game mechanics a bit in 2000, and they came up with Federation Commander. So that's the game I played a lot. But I used to play Starfleet Battles also. Starfleet Battles was you kind of need an accounting staff and a legal staff to play the game because of the thickness of the rule book and all the numbers you got to keep track of. Starfleet Battles Federation Commander streamlined Starfleet Battles quite a bit. So otherwise, more game.
I should. There's a question specifically asking of me about my shirt. I will stand up a little bit so you can see the shirt. Star Trek the magazine shirt. I own every issue. I got it when it first came out. I was a subscriber from the beginning to end of that magazine. I still have them all. They're in one of the 149 boxes of books currently in the storage unit. And Wright says Harpoon and Starfleet Command is his top two favorite games. It's funny that he mentioned Starfleet Command. I spent an hour and a half on the phone. I'm sorry. It's funny that he mentions Harpoon because I spent an hour and a half on the phone with Larry Bond and Chris Carlson today talking about another game project that I'm doing with them. And so it's good to know that Harpoon has a lot of fans out there. The latest edition of Harpoon just came out, the paper edition. The manual game version of it just came out. And Chris is a naval analyst who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency for 20-some years and took early retirement so he could go work on game design full time, which is pretty cool.
A glutton for punishment.
Yep, used to save his allowance to buy back issues of Star Trek the magazine. Yeah, I can believe that. It's a pretty good magazine.
Clearly has its adherents.
Yeah.
I listen. I love it. I had so many. One time I had like 2 complete sets of that. Like I was trying to. One of them belonged to Michael Kuda. He had given us a bunch of stuff to sell, and anyway, it's great. But at some point, you just get tired of moving that stuff around.
Yeah, I think I know that I've got at least one more move in me in the short term because in about a year I intend to buy a house and move everything into it. But it's been about 20 years since I've owned a house.
Oh wow!
Because I worked for the Center for Naval Analysis, and my plan there was to go off. They've got this field program where they send people off to go like do a carrier deployment or something. And my plan there was I wanted to go off to Japan and spend 4 years in Japan, and then when I'd come back, I'd just write a check for a house. Because I was going to live really frugally in Japan, and I knew people who had been able to basically do that. Well, so I didn't want to buy the house before I moved to Japan. Well, I ended up going to the Naval War College instead, and I didn't buy a house in Newport, and I'm glad I didn't. There was this little voice that kept saying, like, you don't know that you're staying, you don't know that you're staying, you don't know that you're staying. And I ended up not buying a house in Newport, which was a good plan. And then when I ended up working for the Defense Intelligence Agency down in Charlottesville, I was kind of I was a square peg, and I happened to be in a square hole job. But there weren't a whole lot of square hole jobs in that agency, and it wasn't clear to me there were any others in Charlottesville. And so if I had realized that I was going to be down there for 9 years, or 8 years, I probably would have bought a house. But I was kind of thinking that I was going to be down there for like 2 years.
In which case, it wouldn't have made sense to buy a house.
Yeah, and so for the last 20 years, I've always thought I'm only going to be someplace for 2 years. Yep. So clearly, I'm wrong because those jobs were like 6 years, 5 years, and 9 years overall. But now I plan on buying a house in Ohio. So.
Well, good. I guess it's Ohio.
I'm from Iowa.
Same
Four
thing.
letters, 3 syllables, mostly I's and O's. They're the same place.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, I left Iowa.
You escaped Iowa.
I escaped.
Good. Okay. So, well, that's an interesting discussion. What are we going to talk about next week?
Oh,
Wow. You got any burning questions?
oh, my brother is commenting. He said the best laid plans. So, yeah.
So let's see here. Is there?
It would be really interesting. No,
What's
it'd be interesting to kind of lay out the different Star Trek war games, Starfleet Battles, Federation Commander, whatever else there is, and just just discuss the game elements of them and how they work. What are the mechanics? How do they represent battle? I think that'd be interesting for everyone.
Yeah, I think we could pretty easily do that, actually.
There are more of those than you might think. Going back, so Pat, do you remember the first one? The first Star Trek?
The first one I played was the Star Trek Starship Combat Simulator by FASA, and then I got Starfleet Battles.
Do you know what the first one published was?
Oh, the first one published? I think it was the early Starfleet Battles Commander or early Starfleet Battles game.
That was the second one, I believe.
Oh,
The first one was the Starfleet Battle Manual by Lou Zacci, which I still have a copy of it somewhere. As I remember it, it's a miniatures game that you play by putting a marker down in like the middle of the playing field, and then all of your references are like your positional references are to that marker. So it's basically like a polar coordinate system.
okay.
A miniatures game, which is kind of weird. I own a copy of it. Haven't looked at it in years. It's in the one of my crates in the storage unit. But I remember going through it and sort of going, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And then Federation Commander came out in 2000. And then there's, what was it? There's a current miniatures game called Star Trek Attack Wing. It's kind of based off the Star Wars X-Wing game. It uses that game system. Yeah. More of a beer and pretzels game.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a fun little game to play and stuff, but and I think that's, as far as board games go, that's pretty much it. Like I said, they made a computerized version of Starfleet Battles called Federation Commander. And if anyone's interested, if you looked it up, Starfleet Command Orion Pirates, I believe some people have taken the game and made it so that it works on Windows 7. You'd have to do a Google search for it and follow whatever mod instructions they have. But it's definitely a pretty good game. So highly recommend.
Couple of versions of the FASA game, because I think it was originally a Star Trek 3 tie-in, if I remember correctly, and then they they changed the name and sort of genericized it. Yeah. FASA also did at least one, maybe two small box games, just like they did with Last Starfighter. So there was a small box game, which I can't remember if I ever owned. I think I did.
I did at some point. So yeah, there's quite a few other games, and then there's actually spin-offs from Starfleet Battles. There's a generic Starship combat game called Starmada, and Starmada, and they've made modules that play in the Starfleet Battles universe. And there's another game called Call to Arms, and they had done is by Mongoose Publishing. They had done a Babylon 5 Starship combat game, and then they made a Starfleet Battles tie-in using that game system. So it's all the same ships in history from Starfleet Battles, but just different game system. So there's quite a few out there.
And then Ad Astra Games has Squadron Strike, and they have an Axanar.
I was just about to say that there's the stuff that Ken's done for that. So
well, let's start working our way through some of the. And why don't we go by the most popular game system to start?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll let you guys decide what order. If you want to do Starfleet Battles first and then Federation, however that works. But we'll do that next week, and if that goes a couple weeks, so be it. We'll good with that.
That works.
We can do that.
All right. Well, good. Well, we are at the end of our hour. I want to thank everyone for joining us once again. Pat, Chris, thank you so much.
Cheers.
Always fun. Always fun.
Yes, we will see everyone next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And if you guys have any questions, send them on. You can send them on to me, Alec at Axanar.com, and I will distribute them as needed. And we will be, today is, Saturday. So we'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock with Axanar After Dark. And should have a good stream. And we've got the next 3 weeks of Axanar Confidential on Friday nights planned out already. This coming week, it's Ted Brunetti, our new director. The following week, it's Mark Largent of Prelude to X We Are. The week after that, it's Mark Edward Lewis. So we're trying to plan out our guests, and hopefully you'll all join us. Thanks so much. If you've joined us tonight, please make sure you subscribe on our YouTube channel, either Axanar or Aries Studios. Those are both our YouTube channels. Make sure you hit the notifications icon so you find out about all of our live streams. So,
one other thing. Yes, I'm not an employee of the people that make Starfleet Battles or anything like that. So I'm not affiliated with that company. So this is not, I was not asked by them in any way, shape, or form, CBS, to come on here and talk about this.
No. How
did you get on here?
I should make that comment too, because I just decided it would be cool to show off a product that I would have bought it if I didn't know Pat. So
all right, everyone. We'll see you all next week. Thanks so much for joining us.
We'll see you. Take care.
Take care.